Welcome to this virtual public information meeting for the Hainesville Road improvements from Washington Street to Rollins Road. Thanks again for attending tonight's meeting. My name is Kurt Corrigan, and I'm from V3 Companies. I'll be serving as the project manager for the project. With us from V3 is Laura Shue and Vicki Sykes. Laura will be serving as a project engineer, and Vicki is our drainage engineer. With us from Lake County Division of Transportation is Kevin Carrier and Mike Lukich. The five of us will represent the project team. In addition, for tonight and to help out with the question and answer portion of this meeting, we do have some other members of the Lake County DOT and V3 just to help out with questions later on. And with us tonight, we do have County Board Member Wasik in attendance as well. So welcome. A couple housekeeping items tonight. The meeting is being recorded. The recorded presentation and slide deck will be made available on the project website after the meeting. Please take a second to locate the question and answer icon on your screen. All questions or comments must be typed using the Q&A button. Our project team will be monitoring these questions throughout the presentation to help facilitate the answer them during the Q&A session. So for tonight, the agenda topics that we're going to go through tonight are the various project phases, project orientation, the purpose and need of the project, the proposed improvements, the land acquisition process, the project schedule, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So the project phases. Here's a brief overview of what a typical roadway project looks like. There are typically three phases. Phase one is referred to as the preliminary engineering environmental studies phase, and that's currently where we're at. This phase includes solicit stakeholder input. So back in June in 2021, we did have a public information website set up so people could take a look at that and give us comments and different questions on the project back in June. And then, of course, tonight's virtual public meeting as well. Identifying the purpose and need of the project, we'll evaluate alternatives, evaluate environmental conditions, and identify potential land acquisition. This phase usually takes 18 to 24 months. The next phase, phase two, is known as the detailed design and contract plan preparation phase. This phase includes detailed design to produce construction documents, any permitting that's associated with the project, and land acquisition. Depending on the number of land parcels for acquisition, this phase could take typically 18 to 24 months. And lastly is phase three, which is the construction phase. We anticipate construction on this project to start sometime in 2024 and lasting 2 construction seasons. Next, just to orientate everybody on the project, Hainesville Road from Washington Street to Rollins, highlighted in yellow. North is facing up. Hainesville is owned and maintained by the Lake County Division of Transportation. The project limits are focused towards improvements of Hainesville Road. However, some work is anticipated outside of the Hainesville Road footprint as a result of the new corridor improvements, but we'll touch on more specifics of that later in the presentation. So why Hainesville Road, the purpose and need, why are we here tonight? So the purpose of this project is to address safety, mobility, and operational improvements of both motorized and non-motorized vehicles along the corridor. The Hainesville Road improvement was included in the county's 2019 to 2024 5-year plan program and identified as a modernization project to reduce delays, increase safety, and operations by improving traffic flow. The county follows a consensus-based approach, including stakeholder and multi-agency involvement and working with local partners to identify regional priorities. Maintaining and improving the county's highway system is essential for a strong local economy and for the safe and efficient movement of goods and people. The phase one study evaluated both motorized and non-motorized transportation from a safety, capacity, and operational perspective. Laura will touch on this Laura will step through that process.
Thanks, Kurt. And so just zooming in and focusing on the project limits as it relates to our phase 1 study, Hainesville Road is situated within 3 different municipalities. The village of Brown Lake Beach, which is highlighted in the brown areas, the village of Round Lake Park, highlighted in purple, and then unincorporated Avon Township, which is the uncolored areas surrounding Highland Lake. You'll also notice that Wrenwood Golf Course primarily abuts the eastern portion of Hainesville Road from just south of Rollins Road to Lake Avenue. The golf course is a publicly owned course and is operated by the Round Lake Area Park District. We've also had discussions with the Round Lake Management Commission, as well as Highland Lake Community, highlighted there on the slide. Our project team has been coordinating with these various agencies and stakeholders throughout the study. And so the first public involvement activity that Kurt had highlighted before was held in June of last year. Lake County DOT established a website to host a virtual public forum introducing the project. It was there that we presented some of the potential alternatives to be considered for this corridor. One of those to be maintaining the 2-lane road as we see it today, or the other is to widen to a 3-lane section by adding a bidirectional or 2-way left turn lane. Both of these roadway options considered whether bicycle or pedestrian accommodations would be included or not. And, we would refer to this as non-motorized travel. The purpose of the forum was to also solicit public feedback. And so after the 2-week comment period, we had received 70 comments. About 43% of those comments were related to non-motorized travel accommodations. 33% were related to adding the bidirectional or 2-way left turn lane. And then 24% were related to other topics along the corridor. And as you can see here on the slide, there was a lot of support towards adding a new sidewalk and path as part of this project. There was some mixed feedback to the 3-lane option, and then some of the other general topics covered other traffic calming measures. These comments were taken into consideration and applied as appropriate in accordance with local and state permitting requirements. We had met with the municipal stakeholders to continue our coordination efforts after the public meeting, and we reviewed the results of those comments with them as well. It was expressed in the comments that there is a lack of separated pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Again, just further highlighting the purpose and need for this project, which is to improve both motorized and non-motorized travel accommodations. And so by adding new sidewalk and path from Washington Street to Rollins Road, it provides residents not only another travel option, but also the safe connectivity necessary for this stretch of Hainesville. Installing these facilities on both sides of Hainesville Road will also minimize the need for pedestrian crossings within the corridor. And as you look at the map, the dotted blue lines shown on the map highlight the existing regional trails in the area. These non-motorized travel accommodations along Hainesville Road will connect residents to key regional destinations such as the Grays Lake Bike Path along Washington Street and the Millennium Trail along Rollins Road. These facilities will also connect residents to local schools, churches, and commercial properties in the areas. Our meetings with the municipalities have been very cooperative. Each of them have agreed to participate in the cost share and maintenance of these facilities, just knowing how much of an asset new sidewalk and path will be to the community. Now, in terms of motorized vehicular traffic, this map highlights the average daily traffic, or ADT, along Hainesville Road. The 2020 traffic volumes are shown in black. These volumes were derived from pre-COVID traffic counts and projected to 2020 in order to normalize some of these traffic volumes. Future or projected 2050 traffic volumes are shown in red, which are developed by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. And so over the next 30 or so years, we'll expect that traffic volumes are expected to increase by about 20%. These traffic projections are developed utilizing existing traffic data and patterns. In addition to reviewing the traffic data and projections, we also conducted a crash analysis as part of this phase 1 study. Within the project limits, there are 70 driveways and 11 local streets intersecting Hainesville Road. The graphic that pops up here to the right provides just a high-level perspective of the proximity of these driveway locations in blue within the corridor. As you can imagine and probably experience, the higher density of driveways and side streets increases the number of conflict points. And so based on our review of the reported crashes within the 5-year study period, there was a total of 74 crashes within the project limits, 58% of which were rear end crashes, 23% were turning an angle, and 18% fixed object. And with the projected 20% increase in traffic by the year 2050, we would also expect the volume of crashes to increase, especially without implementing the 3-lane section. And ultimately, the primary purpose of this project, again, is to address safety and mobility of both motorized and non-motorized travel along the corridor. According to industry design standards, oftentimes a bidirectional or 2-way left turn lane is recommended when driveway density exceeds 30 to 60 driveways per mile. And so how does this criteria apply to Hainesville Road? Well, the table here on this slide suggests that Hainesville Road actually exceeds this criteria. The segment north of Shorewood actually has a driveway density of 70 driveways per mile. And then the segment of Hainesville Road south of Shorewood Road has a density of 44 driveways per mile. Additionally, the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Safety focuses their studies around intersection, pedestrian, and roadway safety to help supplement the decision-making process for various agencies and engineers. And according to their studies, by installing a 2-way left turn lane on an undivided roadway, we could expect a 35% reduction in the number of crashes. Addressing the purpose and need for this project, the preferred alternative for the corridor is widening Hainesville Road from 2 lanes to 3 lanes and providing sidewalk on the west side and a multi-use path on the east side from Washington Street to Rollins Road. The 3-lane option will provide refuge for turning vehicles and therefore helping to reduce the potential for rear-end crashes. And by installing a sidewalk and a multi-use path on each side of Hainesville Road for the length of the corridor, these facilities will improve access for residents on either side of Hainesville and minimize pedestrian crossings. You'll also notice on our graphic, as part of the overall improvements, the reestablished ditches shown in green. Our drainage engineer will cover these improvements later on in the presentation. And so due to the widening of Hainesville Road corridor to accommodate the safety and mobility improvements, we do anticipate acquiring portions of properties along the already tightened and narrow right-of-way. We are aware of the sensitivities that come with land acquisition and have considered these into our preliminary design as feasible. One example to highlight is the overall typical roadway cross-section of Hainesville Road. Lake County's standard roadway section typically consists of 12-foot travel lanes and a 10-foot wide multi-use path. For this project, we narrowed the travel lanes by 1 foot and the path by 2 feet in order to assist us in reducing impacts to the right-of-way. Another example to highlight is the section of Hainesville Road north of Shorewood Drive. Now, this section poses a particular challenge to widening the roadway due to the numerous driveways. We intend to fully reconstruct and lower the roadway along this section for 2 reasons. One is to maintain and improve the existing driveway slopes, and the second is to minimize impacts to the right-of-way. Taking a closer look, this slide demonstrates how that would look like. You'll notice that if we kept the same elevation of the road, the construction limits would inevitably encroach further outside of the right-of-way in order to make up the gap circled in the red there. By lowering the roadway, it enables us to match in closer to the existing grades along the right-of-way, reducing further encroachment. Now, there are a lot of other factors such as grading, drainage, other utility relocations, improvements in public facilities, as well as driveway reconstruction that affect the need or type of right-of-way, and those details will continue to be evaluated and worked through in phase 2. We'll highlight the different types of acquisition towards the end of our presentation. And within the section of Hainesville Road south of Shorewood, the properties here are set back a little bit further from the road. So at this time, we are primarily maintaining the existing elevation and will widen and resurface the roadway as shown there on the graphic. We do acknowledge the public feedback received in regards to the site distance concerns from local streets intersecting with Hainesville Road. We will be conducting intersection site distance evaluations during phase 2 detailed design in order to further enhance the safety. These evaluations involve identifying areas or objects obstructing driver's view within that triangular shaded area, just as an example. And so here our drainage engineer, Vicki, will jump in and provide an overview of the existing drainage as well as the proposed drainage improvements for this project.
Thanks, Laura. Currently, Hainesville Road is primarily drained through roadside ditches and culverts. The two primary drainage outlets containing the majority of the tributary area are tributary to Round Lake. There are 3 smaller outlets that drain to Highland Lake, and those drainage areas are shown in red on the graphic to the right. Existing drainage patterns will be maintained in the proposed condition. An additional tributary area will not be directed towards Highland Lake or Round Lake. Flooding records were requested from all agencies involved, including the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission. The proposed roadway footprint was reduced to the extent possible to reduce the new impervious area. The main drainage priority is to ensure the discharge rates from the project area are not increased due to the proposed improvements. This is accomplished by providing stormwater detention by expanding 2 existing golf course ponds adjacent to the roadway, and those are shown in blue in the graphic to the right. The project team collaborated with the Park District and the Renwood Golf Course to develop a preliminary design of these 2 detention basins. The detention ponds were sized appropriately to store the required runoff volume, which will slow the release rates downstream of the project. The ponds provide an opportunity to enhance areas of the golf course while providing an opportunity to clean stormwater runoff and improve water quality before it moves downstream. The Park District, the golf course, and the Lake County SMC were all receptive to the off-site detention basin option. To summarize, this will be a closed storm sewer system with curb and gutter. Existing tributary drainage areas will be maintained, and there will be a mainline storm sewer along the east side of the roadway to convey roadway, sidewalk, and path runoff. Roadside ditches will be improved where needed to convey off-site drainage areas, and 2 detention ponds will be provided to reduce release rates and improve water quality. Laura?
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. We will also anticipate some tree removal along the golf course frontage. This was a point that was raised by the Park District. However, these trees will be replaced in accordance with Lake County DOT policy. Landscaping restoration and plans will be further developed during the phase 2 detailed design. And so hopefully in summary, we've presented tonight a variety of components that factor into how we got to the preferred alternative. The selected alternative is a result of a comprehensive design approach considering motorized and non-motorized users, drainage, utilities, and other public facilities. Land acquisition along the corridor is anticipated in order to fit these improvements, and Kurt will highlight that process on the next slide.
All right, thanks, Laura. Thanks, Vicki. So land acquisition. The Lake County DOT follows a standard land acquisition process in accordance with the state and federal guidelines. There are typically three types of land acquisition. The first type is right-of-way or fee simple. This is the acquisition of property, including all rights and interests, similar to buying a house or a property that you normally would do today. Second type is a permanent easement where the ownership is retained by the property owner, but the local agency or utility company, for instance, is allowed to use the property at any time to maintain or build a certain facility. And the third type is a temporary easement. Ownership is retained by the property owner, but the property is used only during construction to an agreed upon time duration. Those are, in a nutshell, the three types of land acquisitions. So the process. First, we determine ownership through the preparation of property descriptions and survey, which we are currently doing now, and we have a pretty good handle on the over 100 different property owners out there. And next, then we'll provide an independent appraisal of the property, which is completed by an independent licensed appraiser. This is scheduled to be done in late 2022 and into 2023. And so once the appraisals are complete and the negotiation package is developed and the land acquisition team has worked with the design team, Laura, myself, and Vicki, to understand and really detail out the acquisition, whether it's a permanent, temporary, or a right-of-way acquisition, then appraisal packages and negotiation packages will go out to the individual property owners sometime in 2023. Most likely, as the appraisals come in and we start to negotiate, it'll be in the second half of 2023. So that summarizes the land acquisition process. Next, we'll discuss the project schedule here. The next steps towards concluding the phase one process is to finalize the preliminary engineering report and for evaluation in phase two. We anticipate that to be completed in early 2022. Phase two will likely begin in the summer of 2022, and we'll begin the detailed design and construction documents and begin the permitting process. We don't expect the land acquisition process to occur until later this year and into 2023. And then, as I previously stated, construction is targeted for the summer of 2024. This will depend on the project readiness, land acquisition, and funding availability. We would anticipate utility relocations and adjustments to start ahead of the actual roadway constructions, and this project will most likely take 2 construction seasons. So with that includes the formal presentation part of the project. We thank you again for attending tonight's public meeting. Comments received by April 7th of 2022 will be included as part of the public record in the phase one report. These comments are very helpful as we move into the phase two detailed design. So if you did, something comes to mind within the next couple of weeks, you can visit the project website and you can certainly provide your questions or comments there. And then as we've gone through the presentation, Jake Bauer with V3 has been moderating the questions throughout the presentation, and he will start the Q&A process here shortly. And I just want to remind everybody, lastly, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the project website. And on that project website is a comment form that you can formally provide your comments as well. So after tonight, if you want to go back and relook at things and take a look at the information provided, you can certainly do so. And like I said, this will be posted on the project website. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Jake and start the question and answer period.
Thanks, Kurt. So as Kurt mentioned, I've been collecting questions that have popped up in the Q&A, compiling them, and I'll read them out loud and for the panel to respond. So in some cases, if there's a lot of similar questions, I'll group those together, but you can continue to ask questions and I'll continue to pose them to the group. So start out with the roadway question. So will the proposed roadway be made of full depth PCC or some Portland cement concrete or full depth HMA asphalt? So in the this is Kurt. So in the widening and reconstruction portions, it'll be as of right now, it's a full depth HMA pavement with obviously aggregate stone base underneath that. Okay. Thanks, Kurt. Okay, our next question related to traffic. How are you planning to regulate the speed limit? As of now, I see more trucks exceeding the speed limit.
So I can take this one, and I don't know if the county wants to chime in here. I think the preference along this corridor is to have, a consistent speed limit wherever we can. But I believe the county is also, we need to follow some federal requirements when establishing or changing any of the speed limits. Right now for Hainesville Road, the speed limit is really determined based on the roadway characteristics, such as, the number of driveways and pedestrian and bicycle activities. So, that's just the nature of the road here. It's primarily residential. So as of now, we're going to be maintaining the speed limit just due to the number of driveways associated with this corridor.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, I can jump into Jake,
Sure.
and that's exactly correct what Laura said. And my name's Kevin Carrier with the Lake County DOT. So after the improvement is complete, we will do another speed study, which Laura alluded to there. So we'll take a look at the speed on the road and the character of the road to kind of set a new speed limit. In some cases, it does remain the same. We follow a set of federal and state guidelines on how to go about those speed studies and setting those speed limits. So one little note too, because we know that I think there was another question, Jake, down the road about increased speeding and stuff like that too as part of the project. And we haven't just on Washington Street to the south there, we had some speed data from prior to the widening there. It went from a 2-lane to a 5-lane road. And the speeds were pretty consistent even when it went to a 5-lane roadway. So I think there is a thought that maybe widening, having additional lanes could lead to some additional speeding, and we just haven't seen the data kind of back that up on our system. So I just wanted to kind of add to that.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Another question related to traffic. So will there be anything to stop people cutting through from Rollins to Shorewood down North Avenue? So it's the questions related to traffic using, I guess, cutting through from Rollins to Shorewood down North Avenue.
I guess we'll have to look into that a little bit more detail after the meeting and take a look and see what that is. That's the first time it's really come up in the public comment period. So we'll take a closer look at that particular item.
Sounds good. All right, I'm gonna shift to a couple drainage questions here. So the first one, if you lower the road north of Shorewood, that may increase the risk of flooding to the houses on the west side homes adjacent to the pond and Redwood Golf Course. We had that issue a few years ago. Can the runoff from the pond have directional runoff so that it does not overflow over the street and flood the homes?
Yeah, so the way these detention ponds get designed is, we calculate what the 100-year, the design storm high water level is. And then usually there's a berm around the pond, and that berm is usually set 1 or 2 feet above that high water level. And then we will have like an emergency overflow, and that will, that will pay close attention to the homes around these detention basins, their low opening, surveyed low opening elevations to make sure we're not having any negative impacts about the homes around the detention basins. But then the overland flow path will likely go onto the road and then downstream to wherever it went in the existing condition. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I will add that, as the, roadway engineer, we are, in constant coordination with our drainage engineer to ensure that what we're proposing by lowering the roadway doesn't negatively affect, drainage or flooding concerns. So that is definitely something that we've looked into and verified from a drainage perspective as well.
Good. Great. Thanks, Vicki and Laura. So another drainage question. Will homeowners be allowed to connect sump pump output to the new storm sewer?
That's something that, is part of the phase 2 detailed design. That's something that we're going to, look into and further evaluate. We need to locate, as we locate certain, pipes and conditions as we're out there. I think that's something that we need to fully evaluate when we get into the detailed design. I don't know if Kurt, if there's anything you wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, in addition to that, there is also some, local ordinances and ordinances with the county DOT on sump pump hookups as well. So it's come up a couple different times. So we definitely have it on our phase 2 target items to take a look at and verify with the local municipalities as well as Lake County, since the storm sewer will be under the maintenance of the counties. So we just want to make sure to double check that and to see what, as we move through the phase 2 process, what that really means and how many and so on and so forth. So it is a topic. It is on the to-do list as part of phase 2.
Thanks, Kurt. This is Mike Lucas, project manager for the project for Lake County. And I just wanted to add this is a great opportunity to segue, in fact, with general questions that are particular to properties that, this is the opportunity for the residents along that corridor that may be concerned about a sump pump or maybe some localized ponding issue, drainage issue, or a driveway of some sort, to reach out to me at the Lake County. You can find my contact information on the public comment form. Or if you don't want to make a phone call, you always could email Alora or myself or Kurt using the project email, and we will get that information, and then we'll be willing to either, we'll respond obviously, but we'd also be willing to meet you out on the property once we get closer and we start getting into that phase 2 design stage. And if I may, I just saw another comment that just came through from the Ukrainian Youth Camping Organization. And this is just another question with regard to, hey, they're installing or looking to install, construct a parking lot along that corridor. And so that is another location or a question that would be reached out to either V3, Alora, Kurt, or myself. And then we would meet with you out there to make sure that's incorporated. And obviously we'd have to work with the local municipality to make sure, all of those requirements are met. But these are the type of questions that we'd like to know about personally, especially when we're going to phase 2.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, a few more drainage ones that came in, so I think we'll stay here for a little bit. This question states that I agree the preferred alternative is the best option, but you are doubling the impervious area, so you're doubling the amount of water that runs off. Are the ditches getting bigger as part of this project?
I'll take that one. So in many cases, right now the roadway is an open drainage system, meaning it runs off into this roadside ditches. And then the proposed condition, in many cases, those ditches are going to get replaced with curb and gutter and a storm sewer. So it'll run off to the curb and gutter, get collected in the inlets, run through the storm sewer to the detention basins where it's restricted and then released downstream at a very slow rate. Now, in some cases, there are still going to be ditches behind the back of curb where we have offsite area draining towards the roadway. And those ditches, are sized to convey the 50-year flow from that runoff. So in some cases, you're going to have ditches. Some cases, you're going to have inlets out behind the back of the road, collect little small runoff areas, and then sometimes big full-size ditches when you have a big offsite area.
Okay. Thanks, Vicki.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one more on drainage. Will any of the runoff from the additional pond storage flow back into the watershed during storm events? Is it possible this water will flow into Round or Highland Lake?
Well, so the runoff from the roadway goes into the detention basins, and then those detention basins have an outlet pipe that then drains, that outlet pipe drains to Round Lake. The runoff right now drains to Round Lake, and it'll continue to drain there in the proposed condition, but at a much slower rate. That's what the detention basins do. The runoff goes into the basin, and there's plenty of volume there. It fills up, and then there's a control structure at each detention pond to release the runoff at a reduced rate. So it'll keep going where it goes today. If it goes to Round Lake, it'll continue to go to Round Lake.
Okay. One more drainage one for now. Does your analysis consider forward-looking projects for water levels, et cetera, due to climate change? So I think this has to do with the what we considered as our data for developing the stormwater recommendations.
I'm not really quite sure what we're asking there as far as climate change. Certainly there's new rainfall data that was just published, higher rainfall intensities that we now use to design the storm sewer system and the detention ponds. So climate change is taken into account on that level. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in there, but I think that
I was just going to say that, that it did take into consider in the increase in rainfall intensity. And so that is, that is accounted for as part of the calculations for our stormwater detention.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're subject to the, meeting the requirements of the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission also in their watershed development ordinance. And that has been updated, as you guys mentioned, to account for that new runoff data and new, not only runoff requirements, but also water quality and things like that. So that we have to follow their ordinance and their guidance, which we have done and will continue to do on the project.
And I will just chime in and say we're lucky for this project that we have these detention basins available to use. A lot of roadway projects have to provide their stormwater detention in oversized storm sewers, which doesn't do anything for water quality, whereas the ponds, the water can settle out before it moves downstream. They're both wet bottom detention basins that allow the sediment to settle out, and much more environmentally friendly to put it, and more efficient to put it in the ponds than in oversized storm sewers.
Yeah, and I guess just to piggyback on that, we have that with the Highland Lake Homeowners Association and the Round Lake Water Commission, I guess, for lack of a better term, concerning the lake quality and the lake water. So we are very conscientious of that. And that is why the closed drainage systems with the expanded ponds are going to help that situation. And really the capturing the roadway runoff within the road right of way itself. So it doesn't run off into these areas like it does today is going to be a big help from a water quality standpoint. So again, we have met with both different groups for both lakes and are in communication with them as we have gone through phase one, and will continue to be in communication with them going into phase two. So we have done some due diligence on that part of it as well.
Yeah, and I will also add too, as part of the presentation, we also looked for opportunities to reduce the roadway and impervious footprint. So, narrow lanes, and as well as, reducing the multi-use path from 10 to 8 feet to, again, help offset as much new impervious area as we can.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so let's shift to traffic control and maintenance of traffic. So start off with this one. So will Hainesville Road be closed during construction?
I'll take this. No, we don't anticipate it to be closed. We anticipate it to be built essentially one half at a time. There may be some periods, because we do have some storm sewer crossings, that during the day you might see some closures or at least some delays in that. The detailed maintenance of traffic plans have not been developed per se, but a roadway project typical like this, we'll anticipate building it half at a time. So there won't be a full lane closure on, but Hainesville won't be closed during construction.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Okay, so you kind of answered this next one. Will a lane remain open during construction?
Yeah, so there will be a lane. Obviously, there's probably going to be times where, like I say, we have to cross the road with different utilities and whatnot. So there will be flaggers out there throughout the day. And then I will address I'm anticipating the driveway question as well as part of maintenance of traffic. Driveways and access to driveways will remain throughout the project. Now, in some cases, during some phases, the driveways will be stone until we can get in there and rebuild the driveways. And in some cases, if we can rebuild them half at a time because of the width and whatnot, we will. In some cases, there's going to be a period where the workers are actually working in the driveway, so we have to get it done. So obviously the driveway will be closed at that time, but generally speaking, we'll keep the driveways open as much as possible. But at some point, we have to actually build the driveway. So and as we get closer during construction, these details are going to be worked out. Various, notices and things before construction will be provided to the homeowners. Mail carrier is another question that will most likely come up, is how's the mail going to be delivered. We'll work with the post office on that. Most likely temporary mailboxes will be set up in order to ensure the mail delivery. Some cases we've put together clusters of mailbox, so the postal carrier only has to go to one spot, and then we'll have a bank of mailboxes. So let's say a group of 15 houses can go to one box, makes it easier on the mail carrier during construction. And then once construction is over, we'll reestablish the mailboxes at each individual property. So that's typically how we've done this in the past.
Thanks, Kurt. So another one kind of to do with coordination regarding construction. So will there be a phased approach during construction? I kind of answered that, but will you use this to minimize the impact for school bus transportation?
Well, when you say minimize, I guess if typically on projects like this where we're trying to maintain and still build the road, obviously the school schedules come into play and pick up and drop off. So kids are where they're, typically picked up and dropped off. We'll make it a point with the contractor as we move towards actual construction to make these points and to make the information available. So again, we'll work with the school district, the bus, wherever the bus routes are. That's part of the maintenance of traffic and the specifications and the details as part of the contract documents.
Yeah, I will say that we've, sent out letters to the school district, police, fire, just the surrounding communities to make them aware that this project is going on. And so we'll make every effort from phase 1 going into phase 2 to continue that coordination effort to ensure, minimizing as much impacts as possible. Obviously, where we can with maintaining traffic throughout construction. So.
Thank you. Another related question. So are there phase plans for the roadway as to how construction will affect traffic patterns and pedestrian patterns? For example, will the east side be done in 2024 and the west in 2025?
Well, I guess at this point, from an east to west side of things, we haven't determined which side is going to go first. A lot of times we'll take a look at the different traffic patterns. Is it a northbound, a southbound pattern? We have on the east side north of, or the west side north of Shorewood, there's plenty of driveways in there to deal with. So we'll take all those considerations and try to map out what side to start with first makes sense. There's also the drainage components and some of the public facility components as well, between water main and storm sewer and, sanitary sewer hookups and things like that we have to take into consideration during the phasing of construction. So at this point, we haven't dictated one side or the other, but those are just some of the different factors that we'll have to try to work into the maintenance of traffic so it makes sense for the flow of the construction.
Sure. Okay, thank you. All right, another one related to construction. Can you please define how long a construction season is?
Well, it's the Midwest. So there's, fall, spring, summer, winter, and then construction. So typically, we would like to get started. Good time to get started on some, minor work is always March, April. you get into the heavy construction during the good weather, and then we try to wrap things up, you know, in the late fall, October, November. In some cases, there's plenty of work to do over the winter, like underground, you know, sanitary water, stormwater work that we can still do underground work during the winter months. With the number of utility relocations out here, we could anticipate the first part of 2024 being a lot of utility relocations, and then move into the storm sewer and some of the water main type construction, and then move into 2025 and really hit the roadway portion of that. So basically building the road from the bottom up, obviously, starting with the utilities and moving your way up towards the top. So 2024, you'll probably see a lot of underground work. That's the fun work, I guess, because nobody sees it once it's covered up. And then when 2025, we'll probably work into more of the roadway work. You'll start to see the improvements be more defined in 2025.
Okay. We got another detailed question that just came in about construction staging. So if you're excavating to install aggregate subgrade and full depth HMA, it seems like it would make sense to make Hainesville one direction and detour the other direction. You'll have a 2-foot drop off at times, and you do not have room for Jersey wall if you're using existing roadways, unless you install a significant amount of temporary pavement. Is that something that we've considered? Is that on our radar? Are we at that level of detail?
We're not necessarily at that level of detail. It is on the radar because, to the point of temporary pavement, that could be a very big expense during the construction. So between building it half of the time, one-way detour, let's say, those are all considerations that we have to go through a detailed, really a cost benefit analysis of what that really means. What does a detour do to fire traffic, buses, public safety for that matter? Is that, how does that offset a lot of temporary pavement? I would agree with you. Sometimes it does make sense, to do a one-way detour, build half of the road and save on a lot of expense on temporary pavement and moving things around. And in some cases, depending on public safety and some of the other issues, it doesn't make sense, and we sort of have to bite that bullet. But to your point, yes, there will be a good significant drop off during excavation, and we have to take that into consideration during the maintenance of traffic plans.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. Got a couple of questions related to utilities. One of these you touched on in your previous response. Will the utilities be required to go underground?
At this point, we have not had that request from agencies or Lake County DOT to pursue the utilities to go underground. Kevin just probably wants to chime in here on that one.
Yeah, just overall, we don't require the utilities to go underground, and that is a pretty significant cost. So usually it's up to them, whether it be ComEd or whoever owns the power lines. It may be their decision if there's impacts or things they have to concern when they're doing their relocations. In some cases, municipalities or townships, I guess, could or have considered putting it underground. But we usually, as part of our projects, just leave that up to the utility company. And then tying into that, even the side of the road, right, whether they go on the east side or the west side of the road, is usually up to them and their operations. And then we'll issue a permit. They'll have to look at other impacts and make sure they're not impacting other utilities and things like that. So we kind of have an oversight on it, but a lot of that is up to them and their operations.
One more on utilities. So for people working from home, are you going to guarantee no interruption in utilities, for example, electricity and internet?
Well, I guess I've learned over 30 plus years of doing this. I typically am not going to make any guarantees. So the intent is not to disrupt service, but we know things happen in construction. So with that, like I said, the intent is not to disrupt it, but today in 2022, I can't tell you for certain that there won't be a disruption at some point through construction.
Okay, thanks. All right. I have another question here, construction related to trees. So will trees or other greenery be replaced in all instances where they'll be removed? Privacy and noise suppression is a major concern for this person.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think, obviously, we want to avoid impacts to trees wherever it's possible, especially with a high quality tree. So as part of the phase 1, we did conduct a tree survey in order to identify the type of tree and its condition. So when we look into phase 2, we'll get into more of that detailed design on whether or not we can meander the sidewalk or the path around a high quality tree, but also knowing our limitations of the limited right of way and property acquisition. So it becomes a little bit nuanced when we get into it, but it's definitely on our radar to ensure that we are, minimizing the impacts to trees wherever it's possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think that's a good segue to property acquisition. So we have a few questions related to Property Act. So let's start with something that's similar. So if land is acquired, will compensation include consideration of landscaping and structures?
So typically, as the appraisal and negotiation packages are developed, those features are accounted for. And Kevin, maybe from a Lake County DOT policy standpoint, you can jump in with a little more detail on that.
Yeah, we do, as part of the independent appraisal that Kurt mentioned during the presentation, those are all considered. So the impacts to the property, whether it be right of way, permanent easement, or temporary easement, are part of that. And then also, what are considered damages to the remainder of the property, which could be things like landscaping or trees, fences. Those are all considered as part of that appraisal and for the compensation. So most of the time what we try to do is provide the property owner, once we come to an agreed upon settlement, just provide them with the dollars for those, for the cost for those items, rather than putting them back as part of the construction. And then those property owners can go and put, the landscaping or fencing or whatever it may be back kind of as they see fit and within their property, and where they, species and all that kind of stuff that they would prefer to see. So that's kind of in general, Kurt, the process that we would follow.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I have a similar question on kind of headed down this path, so I think you answered some of it. Will residents have any input on the landscaping of the yards during and post construction? For example, I'd rather have old unique trees and arborvitae on the west side of the current sidewalk, and I would hate to see it removed as it helps to reduce road noise. So obviously, I don't know about the specific property, but in generally, will residents have input on the landscaping of the yards during and post construction?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of the evaluation of the independent appraiser and the negotiation package on whether it's right of way, permanent or temporary easement. I think, like Kevin said, the county will provide monetary compensation, and then, from the homeowner standpoint, what they put back, will be somewhat up to them.
And I think just jumping in from perspective from the county is that we're trying to minimize the disruption beyond the right of way. So the objective here is to achieve the drainage, the multi-use path, sidewalk improvements within the county right of way. In those cases where we can't do it, obviously, the owners will reach out to the owners we have already based on some just conservative estimates. So the letters that were sent out were just based on conservative phase 1 estimates that we're thinking may continue on to phase 2. But as we start the discussion with the residents and start looking into some of the details of the corridor design, those in fact may reduce, and we may not need some of the properties may not need to remove some of those bushes or trees. So I think a lot of the details in terms of how much and how those will be replaced are probably best answered as we transition from phase 1 to phase 2. And again, just continuing the conversation and reaching out to the county.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So one more related to the trees. So I understand that all efforts will be made to save the trees, but will they be replaced where they need to be removed?
Mike, you want to take this one, or you want me to? either way.
You can start off. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So, and sorry, yeah, we missed that part of it earlier. But yeah, we try to replace them as best we can. Within our right of way, we are limited in space. And, if you get trees too close to the road, they can be, considered a safety issue. So that's something we just have to kind of balance and take a look at as part of phase 2. But we do have opportunities, I think it was mentioned as part of the Q&A or maybe the presentation too, is, working with the golf course. I think there's going to be some opportunities there around those ponds, and along maybe some of their property too, maybe along the path or kind of towards the outskirts of the right of way where, we can look to put back some of those replacement trees and stuff. So it's going to be, again, a phase 2 thing, and we're just going to have to balance it out with, the space within the right of way available space and roadway safety and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The last thing, Jake, I mean, just a common theme, I think, tying to all this stuff is that, as we get into phase 2, like Mike was saying, we really tighten up the design, and, avoidance is certainly our first priority, and then minimizing and then, mitigating where we have to and kind of doing replacements. But we certainly try to avoid and minimize, property impacts, environmental impacts, things like that.
Yep. Yeah, we have another one related to obstructions when building the sidewalk or path that are not trees. So, I guess it would be if there was a existing retaining wall or mailbox or something like that.
Yep, it would all follow suit. And I mean, you can imagine too, it's people's personal property and walls and fences that they had put up, and it's also a cost and an impact to the county too. So there's mutual benefit there to try to avoid things like that. But where we can't, we certainly work that into the negotiations and the compensation for the property owners.
Okay. And I think a good example in general is some of the discussions we've had with the association, Island Lake, or some of the municipalities. They pinpointed some of these, whether it's a stone pillar that, the entrances that have been there for decades. I think we are sensitive. Well, we know we're sensitive to those items, and we've taken notes. And then as we keep saying, as the design transitions to that detailed phase 2, we'll re-engage the association or the owners during the design period.
Thanks, Mike. Another property act question here. Do we have the option to hire our own independent appraiser?
All right, can get off a mute and camera there fast enough.
Yeah,
that's certainly that's an option to the homeowners. So, and it depends. I mean, every case is different. Some we will provide the appraisal first, and we can negotiate off of that. But certainly, the property owner can have their own appraiser done and kind of work that into the negotiations as well if they kind of want to check it. So, certainly an option for the property owners.
Okay. Another question here on land ac. Will private land acquisition be considered? For example, turning over land ownership and future maintenance to the county?
Of specific properties?
Yeah, I think it just has to do with, will there be private land acquisition? I think we've talked about that, but after that point, who takes maintenance and ownership of that property?
So yeah, there is the right of way, the fee simple acquisition, and that would be the full ownership would go to Lake County DOT, and then there's the permanent easement type of acquisition where the property owner maintains the property, but the local agency has use of that particular easement area. So as far as the maintenance goes, for example, like the sidewalk and path maintenance, that is being negotiated and agreements are being drafted between the municipalities and the county on that. Specifically, when we talk about the path and sidewalks, as far as parkways, that would be a county maintenance thing, and then up to the right-of-way lines. So, Kevin, I don't know if you want to clarify a little bit of that from a county maintenance.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think, just some examples that we commonly see is, right away would be for the infrastructure, like Kurt's mentioned in there, if it's a sidewalk, bike path, the utilities, things like that, we would try to acquire right of way to contain those within the right of way, so it's not on a private property. Examples of a permanent easement could be, if we have a culvert going underneath the road, we may need access to maybe like each end of that culvert to clear it out. If it gets clogged with debris or if it needs to be maintained or things like that over its life cycle, we don't necessarily need that property from the owner, but we just need access to it. So we may go and acquire an easement for, say, like a 10 by 10 portion of the land. So the property owner still, keeps their property. But then if our maintenance, individuals need to get down there to inspect it or to clear it out and things like that, they have that access. And then a temporary easement would be kind of for grading and stuff during construction. So for instance, we may go back, an extra 10 feet on someone's property, on their driveway, to flatten out a slope or something like that. That would just be a temporary easement to allow us to do that. But once the construction is done, then that, full property ownership, everything, the easement and whatever is turned back over to the property owner. So it would just be more of a temporary impact during construction. So just a couple examples there of those types of situations.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Okay. One more here on property acquisition. I think we have the right slide up for it. So what determines the type of acquisition that will be chosen by the project? I think you talked about this a little bit just now, and it kind of has to do with the future needs and the construction activities on there. Is there anything to add on what determines the type of acquisition that will be chosen?
I think Kevin touched on it. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Laura. We can move on. So one more on property acquisition. This one's a little specific, but I think a lot of people have this question. So on the UICO property, who has about 350 feet of frontage, it appears they're moving the permanent right-of-way 10 foot west of the existing right-of-way. Will you be removing all the trees? And if so, can you plant new trees along the right-of-way?
So I think from a tree removal standpoint, again, it's on our, evaluation list as we move through the phase 2 detailed design, and where we can avoid trees, we will to be removed. And to Kevin's point earlier, as many trees as we can put back that are feasible within the right of way and safe and so on and so forth. We will certainly be looking at that, but avoidance is number one. And then trying to manipulate the design is 2. And then if we have to remove it, what are we doing to mitigate that as well? So, it's a combination, I think, up and down the corridor, there is a combination of all 3 of those types of circumstances.
Yeah, I will add to say that, as part of our preliminary design, we've established our footprint, and that when we get into the detail, that's where we, want to figure out the nuances where it is possible. And so I think as we step through our presentation, we're looking at it as a comprehensive design. So, as Vicki mentioned, there's some large offsite areas with ditches that need to accommodate some of the tributary area. So that kind of can affect, some of the tree impacts. But again, it's something that it's a nuance we need to look into into phase 2. And is something that we're using this public involvement, this meeting to kind of gather these comments to continue to keep on our radar.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. Actually, one more just came in on property acquisitions. We'll stay here before we move. Is there a percentage of the property that is considered for fee simple?
There's really no percentage. Obviously, we want to try to minimize it. That's our number one goal, and not acquire it at all if we can. But there's certain circumstances like the path or the ditches or a utility, let's say the storm sewer or water main, that we certainly want to keep those within a right of way as a fee simple acquisition for maintenance, repairs, installation, so on and so forth. So there's no percentage per se. We certainly want to minimize it as much as possible throughout the phase 2 design.
Yep. Thanks, Kurt. All right. Next up, we'll move to some questions on sidewalk and path throughout the project. So first off, it's about maintenance. There's a couple of questions on this, and it's who will maintain the sidewalks and multi-use path.
Yeah, so I touched on that a little quickly, but as we've met with the municipalities, part of the agreement is some cost participation in the installation of the path and sidewalk itself, and then ultimately the maintenance of the path and sidewalk go to the municipality. So those agreements are being worked out with the county now, and will continue to be worked out as we get closer to construction.
Okay. So who's responsible for shoveling snow on the paths and the sidewalks in front of a home?
I'm gonna lean on the county on that one, Kevin or Mike.
Yeah, I can jump on that. We currently don't have a policy for snow plowing for the paths that are on our system. As Kurt mentioned, the sidewalk, we look at those as municipal items that would be up to the local municipalities or the townships. And then similarly, the bike path in this case, looking like trying to have ownership maintenance with the local municipalities or townships. So that would be up to them. But the county doesn't have a policy for snow plowing or ice removal. If we did have a path that was kind of owned by the county, that's more of a local jurisdiction.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, next one's crosswalk. Will there be a crosswalk in the area of Maple Avenue?
I think at this time, we're sort of, again, through the preliminary design. So at this point, we need to include that as a comment to, further our coordination efforts with, the different municipalities. I know when we had met with Highland Lake community, there was another, I believe it was Indian Trail. That was another local street that was brought up and made to our attention about, possibly providing a crosswalk there. So it's definitely something that's in our radar that we'll continue to, coordinate with the municipalities as we move into, phase 2 design. I think, as we mentioned in the presentation, having a sidewalk and, a path on both sides of Hainesville offers that opportunity for residents on both sides of the street to be able to utilize, that facility. So trying to minimize as much of the crossover, pedestrian traffic as much as possible. But definitely if there's things that are brought up where, there's a lot of users crossing the street, that's something that we'll look into for sure. So.
Okay, thanks, Laura. But a similar question actually on something you just touched on. So will a bicycle walking path, or I guess the multi-use path, be added to Shorewood to link the walkways? Shorewood by Wrenwood Golf Course is dangerous for kids going, walking, and cycling to school as there is no sidewalk.
Yeah, so, in our discussions with the village of Round Lake Beach, we had mentioned, that we are providing the path on the east side of Hainesville. And so as part of those discussions, we are designing at least that southeast corner of Hainesville and Shorewood in order to allow the village's future plan for that extension. But because this is a county-led project, the primary focus is Hainesville Road. And we're going to accommodate, that connection point at the intersection. And then it's, just continuing that conversation with the village on whether there are plans for the future path extension along Shorewood Road.
Okay, thank you. All right, another one it's kind of a combo question here. Traffic signals and bikes. So are bike traffic signals planned to be included, or what accommodations will be made as part of the traffic signals for pedestrians and bikes?
So at this point, we're not, I don't think we're anticipating any actual specific bike traffic signals for the project. I think that's something that, we're not going to really provide, but at Shorewood and, at the existing signalized intersections at Shorewood, and then there's connections at Rollins and Washington Street, there are going to be, pedestrian signals to provide that added safety at the already existing signalized intersections along the corridor.
Okay, similar question, traffic signals, and we'll bounce to some traffic questions after this. Are there any proposed new traffic signals as part of the project?
No, not at this time. That's certainly something that we can discuss as a comment, further with the municipalities, but, there's some nuances to, signal being warranted. If there's enough traffic generated at that intersection, are there safety conditions related to that? So there's definitely an analysis that needs to be, conducted in order to determine whether a traffic signal is really warranted. But that wasn't the focus of the study.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, another traffic question. At certain hours of the day, the traffic on Hainesville is solid and backed up. Will there be any other assistance beyond the center lane to assist the Highland Lake neighborhood egress? So I think it has to do with access to the Highland Lake neighborhood, when traffic's backed up on Hainesville Road.
Yeah, I think having the center lane is definitely going to help the capacity standpoint, in the sense that, right now Hainesville is primarily 2 lanes. And so when you have all of these driveways, right, there's 70 driveways and 11, local streets, that offers, that kind of limits that capacity of the roadway. And so for people to be able to kind of stay in the center lane to make that left turn lane, that'll help the traffic flow even just a bit. So I would think from a capacity standpoint, that center lane will help from a refuge standpoint with those turning vehicles, and kind of alleviate some of that backup that we're seeing today.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Couple questions on speed limit. We touched on this one kind of at the start. Will the speed limit change? This section varies between 30 and 35.
Yeah, so I think we answered this a little bit at the beginning. The preference right now is to have that consistent speed limit, but because of the nature of, where Hainesville Road is situated with all these different driveways, residential area, that's a factor of the current speed limit. And so I believe the county is going to be doing like a speed study, once the project is done, in order to, again, confirm, the posted speed limit for the corridor. So that's kind of, on the forefront.
Okay, thanks, Laura. One more on speed limit. How will enforcement of the speed limit be done?
Yeah, so once this, the speed limit set, the enforcement, which is a big part of the speeding, right? The engineering can kind of help a little bit, and then establishing the proper speed limit, but the enforcement is really on, local police departments. So in some cases that may be like the sheriff in the unincorporated areas, or local municipalities too. So, that's, the county DOT builds the infrastructure, maintains the roads, but, we're not involved in the enforcement end, but local law enforcement would be able to handle that.
Thanks, Kevin. All righty. Next one has to do with the project limits on the north end. Will the project that has already been done be revised at the far north end to be redone again? So I think they're asking to clarify the limits on the north end relative to the recent improvements.
So I'll just jump in. I think as part of the phase 1 development, I think what we determined that we're going to also take the engineering review and investigation up to Rollins Road and consider that entire stretch. So depending on the final analysis of that corridor, that section of the corridor, it may be reconstructed or modified based on our analysis.
Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, we got a handful more drainage questions, so I think we'll bounce back to drainage here. So previously we indicated that we'd use a 100-year flood or 100-year flood info. So I think the question is why we used 100-year flood info for this design.
We used the 100-year flow, which is what that really means is a flood that has a 1% chance of happening every year. We use that because that's what the drainage ordinances in this area require us to use. You know, we can only design for so big of a flood, but that's a pretty big one. So we use it because that's what the ordinance requires us to do.
Okay. Next question's related to localized flooding. So can you guarantee we will not get flooded during construction? I was one of the homes that got flooded in 2017, and they were impacted by the flooding at that time. So.
Well, what I can say about that is in phase 2, we once we get into our detailed design, we do engineering plans for each stage of construction, and I'll be required to go through and design a drainage plan for each of those stages. And we'll do our best to make sure we're collecting runoff for all these different phases of construction for things that are half built and half not, and do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. I will say the maintenance of traffic drainage isn't designed for the full drainage design, like the final drainage design is for the full storm event, but we do our best to make sure that there's no flooding during the different phases of construction.
And I can add on to that too. I mean, when we get to construction, we'll have a full-time resident engineer out on site, and they're in close contact with any of the businesses, residents, agencies, and stuff out there. So if there are concerns or if you are having issues, you'll have a point of contact to talk to during construction, and they can work with the construction group and team to make sure that everything's being handled. And there's nothing that's going to overly or burden your site. They can clean that stuff up for you. And then 2017 is there was a big flood event across the county. So I'm certainly aware of that, and that kind of ties into the rainfall data, which around that time was also increased. So this is going to be designed again to accommodate the new rainfall levels, which I don't know, Vicki, you may know. I think there was it was a pretty significant increase from the bulletin 70 to this bulletin 75, which is kind of the rainfall data that we're referring to. I don't know if you know that offhand or not, but
yeah, the 100-year is a 1-inch increase, so it went from, which is very significant.
It's like 7 inches to 8 inches or something like that.
Yeah.
So percentage increase. It was
Yep.
in our project to be designed to accommodate that. So.
Yep.
Thanks, Kevin and Vicki. A few more drainage ones here. Highland Park or Highland Lake is very concerned about runoff from the land on the west in the village of Round Lake Park. Is it possible to arrange a rain garden? We have 2 on the lake now and we'll need another.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about a rain garden adjacent to Round Lake, but we're limited to what we can construct within our linear right of way. And, you could see we're trying to keep that right of way as narrow as possible. And the only place I might, it's really around those detention ponds that I'm going to be able to put in any kind of unique landscaping of any kind. And, we'll have to see in phase 2, but typically there's not enough room in the roadway right of way to construct things like that. With these types of projects, and we're limited to working within the right of way.
So, yeah, Mike from the county and myself met with Highland Lake representatives, and we discussed, and we went, looked at a couple of the different rain garden areas and potential, what they thought would be a good spot for a rain garden. And like Vicki has stated before, a lot of the roadway runoff is going to be contained within this roadway right away itself into the storm sewer system, with some offsite runoff along ditches and in certain inlets along the way. So we certainly have that as one priority for Highland Lake, and Round Lake for that matter is the water quality. That is certainly high on the list. We've heard it not only tonight but previously. So we are very conscious of that, and want to continue to work with those agencies and those associations to see what we're going to do. And I really, between the 2 pond expansions on the golf course and enhancing those, that is going to make a, good, a big difference in the water quality as it goes to Round Lake. And then Highland Lake, again, that area, a lot of that is going to be contained within the roadway right away. So.
Thanks, Kurt. Another question related to guardrails here. So will there be any guardrails installed to protect the bike path and sidewalks on this project?
Yeah, at this time, we do not anticipate any guardrails to be installed. I think, as we look into design, there's certain standards. And so having, the path, being, 7 feet or 5 feet away from the face of curb, that's the design standard where you're able to provide just enough buffer to consider safety for those bicyclists. And then the same goes for, the sidewalks, having that little parkway buffer will offer that ease of comfort for pedestrians.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Okay, one more here for landscaping. Vicky, you mentioned something about the ponds here. It says, are there any plans to add landscaping or other beautification features?
So
go ahead, Kurt.
go ahead, Vicky. Okay, so as part of this project and understanding the need and along the golf course and some of these sensitive areas, our landscape architects are going to be involved specifically in the phase 2 portion of this. So it's not going to be, typical engineers trying to do a landscape plan. Our professional architects are going to be involved throughout this, given the sensitivity of the areas and the sensitivity along the golf course. So to answer that, yeah, we will specifically have landscape plans.
Okay.
Yeah, and I saw a couple other general questions here. Jake, I can jump in on these, and then
Thank you.
I think we're slowing down on questions, and then also I see the attendees list is kind of shrinking down a little bit too. So keep we're here till 7 o'clock or as late as you need us. So keep adding those questions in, and then we'll give it a couple of minutes and maybe consider wrapping here. But saw a couple of questions. One on the impact of this project on taxes or raising taxes on properties. So the county is funding this with local county funds. We did receive a grant, I think around $500,000 through the state of Illinois for a portion of the bike path that's under consideration. But the funds that are coming from the county are just our standard annual revenues that we're receiving. So this won't have any impact or increase or anything on property taxes. There's another question about will this be available in Spanish? Which the presentation, the recording we have right here, we'll post to the website. It'll be exactly as you see it here today. But if there's anyone, I'd urge you to reach out to Kurt, Laura, or Mike if there's any need for any sort of Spanish translation or any other language too. We can certainly accommodate that, or you're even answering questions or having conversations and stuff like that too. So certainly that can be accommodated. Just please reach out to our team on that. Another one was on sanitary line connections, and can a resident, there's a line that runs between their properties, and can that be connected up, to the village system? And I'd urge you to provide that question to the village. So we don't own or maintain the system out there. If you reach out to us with your address, we can help facilitate that, or maybe ask that question to the village as well. But that's probably more of a village question as to connections to their system. And then there's another one on it, the environmental assessments being done, and maybe Kurt and Alora can kind of help out with this, but we do follow, standard. We connect with and get permits and approvals from the standard regulatory agencies, which be Lake County SMC for wetlands. It may be the U.S. Army Corps for wetlands, IDNR. You guys are shaking your head there. If you guys want to jump in too and just kind of go through, the approvals and stuff we have to get on the environmental side as well.
Yeah, I could jump in here. Yeah, so as part of this project, at the very beginning, we try to do this environmental survey request where we take the entire limits of the project and the area of the project and submit that to the Illinois Department of Transportation, which funnels all of that through the IDNR and all of these other agencies to identify if there's any threatened or endangered species, any, isolated wetlands and all of that. So we have done that as part of our phase 1 evaluation to do that environmental environmental study. That is part of the phase 1 process. I will jump in. I did see a question on the northern limits. I believe I saw that question on the curve at the north end. So, and then this kind of answers some of the other question of the limits, the northern limits of the project. So as part of the project improvements, you know, that segment of Hainesville Road will be reconstructed in order to improve the sight distance and then incorporate a super elevation along that curve. You know, a super elevation, what that really means is, you know, as you're driving through the roadway, you'll kind of feel a little tilt or a bank at an angle, which allows you to make it a little bit easier and more comfortable to navigate that curve at a safe speed in order to avoid skidding or, you know, rolling over. So, you know, the proposed sight distance and these super elevation improvements are intended to enable some of the drivers to better see that existing curve and the traffic ahead of them. So hopefully that addresses your concern in that question.
And if I can just roll back to the question about the sanitary and the water main, I believe and Laura or Kurt, you can jump in on this also, but I believe the village of Round Lake Beach or Round Lake Park will be looking to possibly doing some improvements to their existing water and sanitary for a specific portion along that Hainesville corridor on the, I believe it's just south of Clarendon Drive and on the west side of Hainesville Road. And we're going to be trying to incorporate that into this project.
Yeah, Mike, that's ongoing, and that was something that they brought up and said, you know, we're going to be obviously reconstructing the entire road, so it makes sense if there's some public facility improvements that need to happen, then we can certainly work it out with them and as part of the design, so it gets constructed all at once, and we're not having to go back, and neither is the local municipality. So I addressed a question about how much property specifically will be taken. You could certainly add your email and your address, and we can individually discuss that to get into more specifics without getting into the corridor here tonight with, you know, multiple people on that. So if you want to leave your name and address, we can look at that property specifically with an email address and contact you individually as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. A few more questions come in. I think we can keep going with some Q&A here. Okay, so let's go to drainage again. So we have another one about Round Lake. Could you show the path, or could you discuss the path of runoff to Round Lake? So will the future discharge to Round Lake from the detention ponds use drainage pipes the whole way to Round Lake, or will above grade drainage be used across properties?
What I can say about that is whatever the flow path is now between the road and Round Lake, it'll be the same flow path that gets there by pipe. You know, I find the pipe that's leaving the right of way and I connect back into that pipe in the proposed condition. What I can say is that that flow rate going to that existing pipe will be less than or equal to the existing flow rate. That we're not going to increase flow rates, but we're not constructing anything between the road and Round Lake. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. Right. Another question related to the ditches. Will the ditches be concreted or paved in concrete to eliminate weeds and overgrowth during growth seasons?
It's not very likely that we're going to have any concrete ditches. The only time I would ever do that is if there's a really high velocity that was going to rip up all the grass couldn't stand up to. We want to try and keep as much greenery as possible to reduce the amount of pavement so that we reduce the amount of runoff. And plus, when you have the grass, the rainwater can soak in and reduce the amount of runoff that way. It's very environmentally friendly. So I don't anticipate any concrete ditches.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. So on the subject of landscaping and greenery, where you will be putting in new landscaping, will you consider native plants instead of ornamental? That will help hold the soil.
Yeah, I think that's something that, is certainly going to be part of the phase 2 detailed design, understanding, the types of trees and, the types of plantings to kind of help facilitate that. So, yep.
Okay. Thanks. I only have a few more questions here. So I think we can get close to wrapping this up. This one's related to driveways. I think this will come up for a few people. If existing driveways will be impacted, will the homeowners have the option to resurface their entire driveway at a discounted cost, since they will already be working on it and it is impacted? So it's about cost sharing for additional driveway improvements.
We can certainly discuss that with the county to see what that would be, but we would limit our construction and our documents to what we need to do to repair the driveway within the right of way and or a temporary easement.
Jake, did I hear that right? Is that was that the one about could a resident like use the contract to continue to expand the resurfacing on their property?
Yeah, I think it was just about cost sharing for additional improvements if the driveway is impacted.
Yeah, so we'll do, as Kurt mentioned, we'll do what we need to provide a proper slope for the driveway, and if we need temporary easement or whatever for that to do that. I think when you get into construction, I think some residents have worked with the contractor separately outside of our contract. If they were saying, hey, you're here, can you just finish resurfacing my driveway or something like that? But that would be, for the resident to work out directly with the contractor, and that wouldn't be part of the county work or the county contract. But we'll take, within the roadway limits, and then anything to blend the grades back in within temporary easements and stuff would be our responsibility. I think that answers. I don't know if does that answer the question, Jake? Wait.
Yeah, okay. I think so. Okay. I just got another question I want to address on the path and the sidewalk. So this has to do with the decision on the side of the path, I think, and the combination of the multi-use path. So did you ever consider a bike walk combination or bike road combination on the east side of Hainesville Road? Or a bike highway combination is known to have less accidents and would require less property. So maybe this is just a comment on how we came to the decision on the multi-use path and the sidewalk, and how that is applied to the roadway section.
Yeah, I can take that one. Let me just pull up the screen here. So yeah, we, sidewalk, when we design for sidewalk, it's the preferential uses for pedestrians. And then the multi-use path is more for a recreational cyclist, that's physically separated from motorized vehicles. That multi-use path can also be accessed by pedestrians, skaters, even, families with strollers. So when we looked into, one side of the roadway or the other, when you look at the map here, there's actually existing sidewalk that's located on the west side of Hainesville. And so by providing sidewalk on the west side of Hainesville for the entire stretch of the corridor, it kind of helps facilitate and fill those gaps. And then providing the multi-use path on the east side of Hainesville offers an opportunity to connect to the future path along Shorewood for under the village of Round Lake Beach. And then, again, providing both non-travel, non-motorized travel accommodations on both sides of Hainesville offers that connectivity to Rollins Road as well as Washington Street. And then as far as, the county does have, a 4-foot paved shoulder, that could be utilized for more of the experienced cyclists. And then as part of our, discussions, with the evaluations here in the phase 1, that 4-foot shoulder also offers a space for, mail delivery and garbage trucks as well. So that's how we got to our our cross section there.
Jake, I can jump in real quick. I saw one more question here. There's been a ton of good questions here, so we really appreciate it. One last one was kind of a follow-up to one of my responses on, let's see if I can find it here. The person said, I know you don't anticipate an increase in taxes, but does that mean you don't anticipate an increase in property values with the improved accessibility, which is a great question. And I just don't think I'm qualified to answer that one, to be honest with you. I don't really know. We haven't seen any studies that show that our projects, increase or decrease, property values, but yeah, I just can't, I can't answer that one, unfortunately, for you. So, but I did want to bring it up and address it.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. And I think that does it with most of the questions I see here. So maybe Laura, if you could go back to the slide that has some of our contact info on here and some additional ways that people could get in touch with the project team if needed. And I guess I'll let Kurt here close it out here on behalf of E3.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for participating. Lots of great questions. We're taking notes, recording the questions, some of them specifically to addresses and property acquisition. So we're making notes along the way to make sure to take a look at that and get back to various people on those. The project website is listed here. There is a comment period. So if you want your comments, part of the phase 1 document, have those in by April 7th of 2022. If not, though, obviously the website's going to be up and running, and comments and questions throughout are always welcome. And I think on behalf of V3 and Lake County Division of Transportation, we appreciate your input. And again, lots of great questions, and this is exactly why we do it. So we understand the needs of the local participants. So thanks again, and I appreciate the time.